Welcome to another edition of Toast N Jam. Here, boy, we're running out of the show. The show is getting down there. It's our first week of May. Commencement coming up here in about a week and a half. We'll have commencement here at Valley City State University. Of course, Toast N Jam recording from the Science Center, the Road Science Center, room 211, and it's a great broadcast studio they have up here at VCSU. And before we get to our guest today, just a quick recap of what happened this past weekend in VCSU sports. Of course, it was conference weekend. The golf team, they finished seventh on the men's side at the conference golf tournament, which was down in Phoenix, Arizona. Not sure how teams in North Dakota and Montana get a conference tournament in Phoenix, but they did. So they were down in Arizona for the conference tournament and finished seventh as a team. Of course, the women, just a couple of golfers, so not enough to qualify as a team, but a lot to look forward to for Viking golf with what Coach Haas has got coming in as far as recruits and what's going to be coming back next year. Track and field, they are their conference championships of this past weekend. Frida Barrera, again, taking third in the 1500. And I tell you what, another all-conference performance by the great freshman out of Clara City. What a great first year she had in cross country and in track. Jordan Mount also was a all-conference in the long jump, taking third. So he had an outstanding season and almost set a school record. I believe it was in the 200, missed it by, or in the 100, I think, missed it by just, or in the 200. It was in the 200 by .01 seconds. The school record was 21.88, and Jordan Mount did the 200 in 21.89. So almost a school record at the conference meet. That was in Dickinson. Softball team finished fourth at the conference tournament this past week and went 2-2. Of course, had that exciting walk-off win on the first night, 6-5 over Bellevue in the bottom of the eighth inning on Madden Bogary's two-run home run. And then dropped their first game the next day to Providence, 3-2, bounced back and won 10-2 over in the second game to advance. That was over Carroll College, and then they got to the next round and lost to Bellevue 3-0, finished 2-2. But there again, what a lot of optimism for the Viking softball team as they have everybody back. Not one senior on this team that went 27-26, finished fourth in the conference tournament, and they will have everybody back next season. And baseball, boy, what a year for the baseball team. Again, probably the best one we're figuring in about 14 years, taking second place at the conference tournament here in Dickinson, 26-24-1 overall for Coach Alec DeMaria's crew. The big upset over Bellevue on Friday, 9-7, snapping Bellevue's 33-game winning streak. They were number 2 in the country, are number 2 in the country, are going to be hosting a regional coming up next week. A big 9-7 win. Sophomore Cody Shipman had a great outing in helping the Vikings with that victory. Probably the biggest victory in program history, at least in the last 40 years. It's been one of the biggest wins in program history. Moving on and beating Bellevue, but then Bellevue came back and won twice on Sunday, 10-7 and 16-5. To win the conference tournament. But what a great year for Viking baseball. Again, probably the best, at least since 2013. I think that was the last time they took second place in the conference tournament. So that's a recap of what went on at VCSU Sports this past weekend. Now we get to our guest today, and yeah, I ended with baseball for a reason. Our guest today is Dan Gnadt, 1980. Well, I'm not going to say what year you graduated, but you were a member of that 87 baseball team. And Dan, again, appreciate you joining us. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me. When you threw out the invite, I was excited to come on.
Well, of course, Dan and I go back a while. We graduated from Moorhead High together back in '84, and I know we were on the sophomore baseball team together. But then I got cut my senior year for a sophomore pitcher who was a pretty good pitcher, in Bob George. So I didn't mind that at all.
Yeah, Bob was all right.
Now you were more of an infielder through high school and your early stages here at VCSU, weren't you?
Yeah, when I came in '86, I was a third baseman, first baseman, kind of depending on who was pitching. And we had a couple of guys that were out hurt. I think Newstead and Anderson had things going on with their arms, and they couldn't really play the infield or whatever. So I got lucky in a sense that there was an opening there and filled a couple gaps.
What made you have to go back to catching? Did Coach Jim Dew and you have a conversation?
Yeah, Coach Dew and I did have a conversation. I'll tell you how that went. We had our fall meeting, and we were in one of the rooms off the bubble there, and he yelled out and said, "Hey, the infielders and outfielders, you guys go this direction and go downstairs and work out. Pitchers and catchers go into the bubble and get set up." I started heading downstairs to go work out, and he says, "Hey, Gnadt, get over here." And he said, "You want to play on this team?" He goes, "Those other guys are healthy." He goes, "Do you want to play on this team? Learn how to catch." He goes, "Have you caught before?" And I'm like, a couple games when I was 13 years old or whatever, And he says, "Well, spend some time this fall, winter getting ready," because he goes, well, "You're gonna have to you have to catch." So I went to work and started figuring out how to do it.
What was the biggest transition for you, Dan, going from infield to catching?
I enjoyed it. It was just the catching of guys that are throwing, Darren Lowe throwing in the mid 90s, and Corey Anderson throwing 27 pitches. He had different angles for different pitches and all this other stuff. Just kind of getting into that part of it, learning the staff, and I guess I got lucky. It came kind of natural. I spent a lot of time up in the batting cage. I was about 55 feet and dark, so I figured if I could learn up there, getting outside and actually being in the real baseball field might be a little easier than it was up there, but had really good competition. The guys that were Jason Birch, Kevin Bratlin, Charlie McCoskey, and those guys, we were all trying to figure it out, and it was a good team that we put together there.
And that 87 team, we've been doing this 100 years of being Vikings. And on Tuesdays, Mondays, I've been doing Viking lore. And the one that we have this week is about that 87 team. Aberdeen was where the district tournament was because the state champion of North Dakota played the state champ of South Dakota, which was Northern State. You won those 2 games. It was the best 2 out of 3. But the lore that we have is about going to Bonanza after beating Northern State. Steve Olson, who was, of course, one of your pitchers that year as well, sent us this lore, and he said, "Hey, Charlie Brown was with, Dave O'Bannon was with on that trip, and we went to Bonanza, and Coach Dew said to Charlie Brown, and people around Valley City know who Charlie is, and said, 'Hey, Charlie, order anything you want.' And Charlie's response was, 'Coach, I'll have what the boys are having.'" Your thoughts on that 87 team and winning the conference and winning the district.
Yeah, a bunch of guys that were grinding it out. Just a bunch of guys that love to play baseball, and we got along really well. To this day, we still got a lot of text threads, and we're getting together coming up here next year. But just from top to bottom of the roster, everybody had kind of a role and understood what we were doing, and it was just guys learning how to do the little things. We had some guys that hit the ball out of the park, and a lot of guys like to hit and run, bunt, moving. Tyler Schlecht, get him on base and just watch him burn it up and get around to third and get him in. Get him on, get him around, get him in. And it was just kind of that way. Our outfielders could chase the ball down. I give those guys a hard time because I don't think I ever had a play at the plate. So, their arms were not rocket arms by any means. I like to give them a hard time. Tim Pinky and I were roommates, lived together for a while, became really good friends. And just guys like that love to play. What I think, it might be true for a lot of teams, but this team in particular, everybody that went on to become a coach, that stayed within baseball and just kept teaching the game they loved and all that kind of stuff. It just kind of, looking back now, you understand why we did so well. Everybody was in it for the right reasons, and we just found ways to win games. I think we went south at the beginning of the season. I don't know if we won a game. We came back 1-15 or whatever it was, and we went on a pretty good roll when we got home. So we just figured out ways to win games.
Well, you look at you talk about Darren Lowe and Tyler Schlecht. They're also football players, a wide receiver and quarterback on the football team. And just a tidbit: Darren Lowe's strikeout record that year, 121, is now number 2.
Was it Cody that broke it?
Connor Martin.
Okay.
Goes 134 this year. And sets a record that stood for 40 years. But what with Darren Lowe, he was a power pitcher. I would assume you said he kind of threw in the 90s, but did he have some good off speed?
Again, you're talking about the Bonanza trip. There's a lot of jokes that go around with Darren Lowe. I was going to say the kid broke the record, but did he do it with all fastballs? And Darren threw hard enough, and his location was good enough, effectively wild or whatever. But he did have a little bit of a breaking ball and worked on a changeup. And I don't know if he mixed in a slider. If it was curveball didn't work, he called it a slider. So yeah, he definitely would overpower a lot of guys. In the spring it's cold, just pump it in there. And Darren was always around. He was always around the plate. And there's stories about him walking forward in a row and then striking out the next 6 guys, or whatever. How it would work out. He'd start out and just make a run on strikeouts. But he was an awesome pitcher. It was put Darren in, you bring in Steve Olson and Corey. I don't know if those guys, they might tell you they threw 90, but I don't know if they were in the mid 80s or whatever. But those guys you tell them put your glove somewhere and they'd hit it. It was crazy. So combination of just figuring out what the hitters didn't like and threw a lot of those pitches, and we were pretty successful that way.
A good rapport between pitcher and catcher. You know what the pitcher's got. You know what sign to lay down. Did you get shaken off a lot, or did you pretty much know what was going on?
Well, with Darren Lowe, I had my signal, was shake the hand, so he would shake off and just pretend like he was going to throw something else and would put down a one. But no, it was. I think a lot of those guys, again, kind of that coach mentality that they had. They knew what pitch they wanted to throw. It was a situation where I'd suggest, and they would respond that way. But a lot of times it worked. I didn't get shaken off a lot. Corey, give him a hard time because he had 12, like I said, 27 pitches, but I think he threw each pitch 5 different ways, and he shook off a lot. But that was all fun and games. But it was really good. I think that was part of it that, for me, catching on to that relationship early, and then over the season developed it, and it was just a real good mix and a good combination as we got into the later of the season.
And I would assume, as an infielder too, when you watched prior to that, you kind of had an idea what to expect. So when you got behind the plate, it wasn't a complete shock.
No, it was. Yeah, it worked out good. Again, a lot of bullpen sessions, and I was really locked in trying to figure out how to become this catcher that Coach Dew said. If I wanted to play.
Yeah.
So another thing about this whole group, we're competitive. So if it was an outfielder and they wanted to play infield, whatever, everybody went to work, and if that's all I got to, speaking for everybody, if this is how I was going to play, I'm going to go to work and figure it out. So that kind of said a lot about that team.
Well, since graduation, Dan, I kind of know what you've been up to, but what has Dan Gnadt been up to here since he left the Valley City State?
Yeah, when I was in Valley City, after my playing days, I started umpiring locally. Ran into my brother was playing for the Moorhead Blues, and they went down to New Ulm, and I didn't really understand more about umpire. I just figured you'd umpire, and games would come around to high school, maybe get into college or whatever. I saw this guy. I don't remember his last name, but his first name is baseball. His name was Babe, and he was umpiring these games at this regional tournament, and it was different than what I've ever seen before. Well, I went to him and I said, "How'd you learn to umpire that way?" He reached in his equipment bag and threw me a brochure for Harry Wendelstedt Umpire School. I think that was 1988. So a couple of years went by and figured out how to get down there and went to umpire school, and then got into the minor leagues. I was able to get a job coming out of umpire school and spent 10 years running through the minor leagues from rookie ball to AAA, and had my 16 spring training games in big leagues. And that's kind of my claim to fame there. But spent a lot of time in baseball. There was seasons where I was between baseball, football, and basketball. I was umpiring and refereeing, 300 days a year. So I did a lot of that from when I got released, or excuse me, from when I got released from Valley City. But when I got I finished my college years, and it just until I was about 50 years old, so almost 10 years ago, and when I kind of hung up the strikes, so to speak. But just umpiring, and then I got into, after umpiring, I'm into the manufacturing dairy business. I was at Cass Clay in Fargo for a while. Took a position down in southeastern Minnesota at Foremost Farms. Fast forward to today, I'm in Fenimore, Wisconsin, director of operations for Immunodynamics, which is a colostrum-based company that we dry colostrum and sell it.
And your boys get into baseball too?
Yeah, my son Brock, he played college baseball for Mayville.
Oh,
yeah.
Did that hurt?
So that was a little bit. Scott Berry was always one of those guys that was the coach of Mayville, right? And then as an umpire, we respected each other, but it wasn't really like we got along or whatever. It was one of those things, that coach-player umpire relationship from a competitor. I sat with Brock during the recruitment trip, and give Scott Berry a lot of credit. I mean, he took Brock in, treated him like one of his own kids, and Brock had a positive experience there. And give Coach Berry credit there. And you can't, Scott Berry's career speaks for itself. He was one of the all-time winningest coaches, I believe, and he still holds that record. But Brock went to Mayville. I still had a hard time, like Parents' Day, trying to wear Mayville stuff. I think I had a Valley City hat on and my Mayville T-shirt, I think. So I couldn't give it in all the way, but I give Brock a hard time, and he did that. Ryan, when we moved, my youngest son Ryan, he played high school baseball and went to Rochester Community College and he just changed it up and thought he found out there was a lot of guys trying to play college baseball, and he just went a different direction. So Brock ended up being a head coach for Onalaska High School for 4 years. I was a bench coach for him there. I did some coaching in Lewiston, Minnesota during Ryan's high school days, and so yeah, I stuck around the game quite a bit.
What are some of your fondest memories, not just with baseball, but just your fondest memories of your time here at VCSU?
Yeah, I think that the people you kind of go through your life, wonder like the high school days. There's a few handful of guys that you're still hanging with. College, I think that's my core group of people that I've been around, into my adult years. Just the relationships that you build, whether it's working out or playing baseball or just hanging out, figuring out who the heck you're going to be when you grow up, type thing. For me, Brock, he'll be 39 years old coming up. So you talk about the 87 season. Don was pregnant through the whole thing, right? And due dates, he was born May 19th. So all that stuff was going on. We had pilots sitting on the side, crop spraying guys that were going to get me back to the hospital. We had guys lined up. Tim Pinky's dad, Al, was helping me out there. So there was this guy in the stands that if the call came in, I was gone. But it worked out where after it was between all that. So
well,
it worked out good.
My birthday's May 17th, so Brock is
right
we're a couple of Tauruses.
Yeah, great people born in May, right?
Absolutely. Only the best ones are born in May. At least that's my theory.
But yeah, a lot of great people. Like I was thinking about it, driving in today. Richard Betting, he was my counselor. A lot of respect for that guy. He I didn't think I'd get emotional saying his name, but I did. He helped me a lot. So let me collect myself here for a second. But just the life advice that he had. When I got there, I wasn't really sure. I was there to play baseball. I wasn't really sure what I was going to be. So we had a lot of conversations there, and he steered me the right way. And, everything that he told me might not have worked out as far as in education, but what I learned in Valley City, I took into a different career, into the manufacturing, food manufacturing, human grade stuff like that. It all applies. So it all worked out. And, Richard Betting was a big part of my experience there.
And playing here in Valley City and going to Valley City State, you're only an hour away from home in Moorhead. Yeah. Did that have something to play with it as well as still being close to home and going away to college?
It worked out pretty good for me. I spent my first year at Golden Valley Junior College in Minneapolis, and that school went bankrupt and closed. And we were at Matson Field playing the game, and it was, I don't know, Coach Dew came up and said, hey, you guys ever consider coming our direction? And there was Jamie Peterson and I, sure, let's go figure it out, and it certainly didn't hurt being close to home, an hour away. It wasn't long after that, Don and I got married in 87. So it was one of those things where we lived in Valley City, I coached Babe Ruth there, Coach Legion in Valley City. And it's just a very nice community, a lot of good people around that just enjoy life, just enjoy doing what we're doing.
And, of course, we'll be celebrating 40 years coming up next spring, so I'm sure you'll be back in town with that group of guys and reminisce. But like you said, you stayed in touch. So it's are there anybody on that team that you like, boy, I'd like to talk to that guy, or I kind of miss talking to that guy? Or
I was going through like our lineup and all the different things, and I think I might have blended them all at like my 86, 87, maybe 88 years together, and there's a lot of guys in there that were a part of it all. But for the most part, like Rich Harchie was a character, and Loomis, he's coaching in Crookston right now, and all those guys. Just I hear him from a distance, just getting together with those guys and not being on a text, or then just getting together and having a couple of sodas or whatever we're gonna have there. It'll be good. I can't believe it's 40 years. Congratulations to the team this year. That was cool to watch, and it's nice to hear about the college being successful. Things have changed a lot with the fall. I think they play some of their games in the fall and they come back and finish. So it's really cool to see how things have evolved over the years. But again, I can't believe our crew, it's been 40 years. So just getting around those guys and, just start talking BS again, that'll be fun.
I know when our basketball team had to travel a little bit this year and play some home games on the road, we went to Concordia and got to see Bucky Burgow, and he was your Legion coach, I believe.
Yeah.
What kinds of things you learned from Bucky? I mean, that's a baseball guy from day one. He and Jerry Harder, when I think of baseball in North Fargo, Moorhead area, those were two guys that Jerry Harder was our vice principal at Moorhead High, and he was the head Legion coach in Fargo. Just guys like that you played for and things that you learned from them, Coach Do, and the coaches and things you learned from them.
Yeah, I think Bucky was my first. I had a lot of coaches, in the lower levels and things, but Bucky was always that guy. He was Concordia's coach, and he came back and he was coaching the Legion. So I always kind of had an eye for what he was doing. And we recently had a Moorhead Blues Hall of Fame event, and I spoke there, and we talked about, a lot of people came up and talked about this, but Bucky is the kind of the king of fundamentals. Just the bunting, do the little things correct. A lot of game situational stuff. And I used to pick his brain a lot. And I think early on, he might have thought I was questioning him. I wasn't questioning him like, what the heck are we doing, right?
Right.
I was questioning him. I just trying to learn why'd we do that kind of stuff. And the most I've learned about baseball from Bucky. You get different characters, different personalities. Everybody has their own way. Get to Valley City and you get introduced to Coach Do. I think he had a unique way of approaching baseball. There's some things that you kind of go, well, what are we doing? And it worked. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But Coach Do, a lot of respect. He was able to bring a team together and make a run. A lot of respect for him. I know he was a heck of a baseball player when he was in his younger years, and he understands the game and put the right guys out there that he thought could get it done, and was able to pull it off. So it was interesting.
He was definitely an interesting character, or is still, and he hasn't changed. He has not changed one iota over the years. Well, again, Dan, appreciate you joining us. And you said Brock is done coaching now. He's out of the coaching. He did his 4 years and he's done.
Yeah, Brock stepped away from it. He wasn't part of the school system there.
Okay.
So it was a little different. He had his other regular job to do, and he needed to kind of focus in that way and go. It wasn't about the money, but you still got to pay your bills, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, he stuck around and went. He's into lacrosse glass. He's a project manager there. So,
okay.
Yeah, and kind of on a side, Brock just had I'm grandpa now for the first time. So that was really cool. April 10th, Nora was born. So that was awesome. And Brock and Hannah are doing a great job. Older first-time parents, but they're doing a good job.
Oh, I can just see Grandpa Dan's going to spoil the heck out of her.
I will, definitely.
Grandma Dawn probably will too.
Yeah, Don's already doing that. I know, and then our youngest, Ryan, youngest being 28, he's getting married in July. So, we're guys held off a little bit on that stuff, but starting to tie things together. So we're excited. It's a busy summer. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Well, Dan, I do appreciate you joining us. I know it's been on the forefront that we wanted to get together and do this and talk like this, and it's been a pleasure. And I look forward to when you come back in next spring and celebrate 40 years of that '87 team. We'll talk again on there, if not before. But again, Dan, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Say hi to Dawn for me, and we will talk again.
Okay, thank you very much.
That is Dan Gnadt again, class of 1988, was on that 87 baseball team that won the conference. They won the district. They went down to Norman, Oklahoma for the regional tournament, and probably went down as one of the better baseball teams that Valley City State has had over the years. And, of course, this year, another great successful baseball season for Valley City State. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Toast and Jam. We'll be back again next week. Toast will be back with us. You don't want to miss next week's show. We're going to have kind of a special show lined up. We're going to probably, looks like we're going to talk a little bit about Class B, the history of Class B wrestling in the state of North Dakota is what we're looking to do, and then do some reminiscing, but you're not going to want to miss next week, Toast and Jam. So, Mike, thanks again to our production staff, Austin Roggelstead here today, and Eric Kringley getting everything set up. And, of course, our guest today, Dan Gnadt. We do appreciate Dan joining us here from Wisconsin. And you join us, again, just go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcast. You can go to the Valley City State University YouTube page and watch us again. And as usual, throughout the week, you can see clips on social media on Facebook, X, and Instagram. So, again, we appreciate you joining us. Don't forget to like us and subscribe, and we will be back again next week with another edition of Toast and Jam here from the Road Science Center on the campus of Valley City State University.